Welcome to the SmartZone demonstration series for Release 5.0. In this series, we'll be covering the new features available in this release. In this demonstration, we'll be covering the Wi-Fi calling feature. With this feature, you can dynamically prioritize voice packets over your wireless LAN for clients utilizing cellular Wi-Fi services. So let's get started. So to make sure that everybody understands how this service works, specifically the Wi-Fi calling feature, it's an IPsec tunnel that is established from your carrier or to your phone to the carrier, and it's specifically to the carrier's evolved packet data gateway. This allows to offload some of the calls that might be going to a carrier's tower to a Wi-Fi service or through a tunnel that is established through a local Wi-Fi connection. This tunnel connection is established based on the voice calls and is based on the cellular signal. Naturally, there is a threshold at one point that it decides that it's going to use Wi-Fi opposed to the cellular signal, or specifically that they purposely want to offload that off the local tower. So most carriers support Wi-Fi calling on iPhones or Pixel by default, so the default configurations are there. And just understand that Android connections usually need to be locked by the carrier for it to support. So just natively, for other words, Android connections do not generally work unless that locking process took place. Now this is outside of the SmartZone feature, but rather once that Wi-Fi calling attempt is made by the smartphone, SmartZone feature allows you to identify those packets and prioritize them within the wireless LAN. Now this detection is based on the Wi-Fi calling ports that are being used and some DNS or IP addresses that we have configured within SmartZone. It is flexible to identify more than one of the fully qualified domain names or IP addresses of the carrier's evolved packet data gateway. And so therefore we can supply multiple, specifically up to 5 different ones per carrier when it comes to those gateways in which those carriers are wanting to provide this Wi-Fi service. Also, QoS ensures the advanced identification of these rules and can prioritize them according to the configurations you have within SmartZone. Now, SmartZone does support seamless roaming across multiple APs and can support either local breakout, tunnel, VLAN, and mesh designs that you have configured in your network. It can also allow you to set unique priorities or specific priorities for Wi-Fi calls for particular carriers. So some carriers you can provide a certain priority, whereas other carriers you could provide less, and it's based on how you configure that into SmartZone. And understand that currently right now we support up to 35 voice clients per AP in this current release. So let's show you how this is configured. So first, to configure this, we go into the Services and Profile tab, as you see here, and then we go down to this Wi-Fi Calling tab. Now in this, we have two different tabs we can choose from, which is Summary, which is providing us the data that we start collecting once this service is enabled, and then we have a Profiles tab, which is actually where we'll configure this service when it comes to the particular handling of these packets based on the carriers. Now I've set up a couple of carriers here. We're going to set up our fourth carrier showing you how to configure this, and that's going to be the T-Mobile carrier. But before we do that, I'd like to show you and point out to you some of the configurations we have on these previous carriers. One is you can see that we can list it by name, we can provide a description. We also notice the priority that we have set on these particular carrier. Each one of these carriers can have a different priority configured if we so choose. And then also we can see that in this case AT&T has 3 of its EPDGs configured on this, whereas the other two just have a single. So we can provide up to 5 different fully qualified domain names or IP addresses for each one of these carriers, which simply allows SmartZone to identify these voice calls and prioritize the packets for that provider. Now what we're going to do is we're going to configure T-Mobile's in this and add it to this carrier profiles. We're going to click on Create here. The first thing we're going to do is label it or identify it here. So we're going to put in T-Mobile. I'll put in a description here. And our next option is where we can actually choose the quality of service we want to provide for this particular carrier. In this case, we've got it selected for voice, but you can see we can select video, best effort, or background as well, depending on how we want to treat or handle this carrier's voice traffic. We're going to go ahead and keep it as voice as we set all the others. And now we're going to start identifying the evolved packet data gateways in which this particular provider wants or has phones that will be connecting back to over the Wi-Fi and of course over the internet. Now, under this particular carrier, T-Mobile, there's actually three profiles or three fully qualified domain names pointing to their EPDGs or their Evolved Packet Data Gateways, and we're going to be adding those to this particular service. I'm going to grab the first one here and place it in the domain name field here. Optionally, you can put in IP addresses if you so choose, but it is not a required field for this function to work. Now, do note that other carriers will have the EPDGs that they will provide to you, and those might be added. They might have additional ones as they go for capacity sake or for diversity or from a logistics standpoint. You'll just have to check back with them from time to time and possibly add those domains as they're being added to that carrier's network. So I'm going to click on that and add the first one. I'm going to go ahead and add a second one here now. And like I said earlier, you can use up to 5 of these that can be added for a carrier in this particular profile, allowing it to have multiple domains in which these phones might be connecting to. And there is my third. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I could change this particular carrier's quality of service or priority if I so choose. I am going to keep it at voice, but do know that's how we can diversify or provide different services for different carriers. Now, once this is configured, this is considered a voice profile. And based on the Wi-Fi calling ports, along with the domain names that you see that I entered there, collectively will help this traffic be identified and then be able to be prioritized based on the voice priority that I've set for these particular carriers. The next step is to enable Wi-Fi calling to be identified on a given wireless LAN, as well as selecting the specific profiles we want associated with it. So we'll go to the wireless LAN. We're going to click on this. We're going to configure. And then we'll go down to the bottom and we'll see in the bottom under the advanced options, there's going to be an option that says Wi-Fi calling. We're going to click this and set it to on, and then it's going to ask us to select the profiles that we want associated with this particular wireless LAN. We're going to go ahead and add them all. So we're going to click on each one of these, move them over to the right. And so all of these domains that we've added underneath these particular profiles will be considered or looked at, and any of these identified based on those Wi-Fi calling ports and the domains selected within these particular profiles, those will be identified, and then therefore the voice traffic will be prioritized. Now, one thing to note too, you can actually go into this directly and create profiles right here at the top of this. But do know that anytime you go in and create these, those profiles will be added to the section that we were looking at earlier. If you go and try to or attempt to delete any of the profiles that you see here, as there is an option, it will also delete it from that section that we were configuring earlier. Also, if you have any other wireless LANs that are associated with that particular profile, it will not allow you to delete it from this section. You have to remove it from the other wireless LANs first. So once I've added these, I'm going to go ahead and push OK to this. We'll see all of them listed here of those profiles. And then now we can go back to that Wi-Fi calling tab. It will take us back to the reporting tab. Once the APs start reporting the information here, we can start seeing the data of those identified calls. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit until we start receiving that data. Once we have some wireless LAN clients that are trying to connect back to their Wi-Fi calling provider, we can see that those are identified and then starting to be reported within our SmartZone. We can see on the Wi-Fi calling traffic, we can see some of the callers showing up or the clients. And then also we can see that it identifies the SSIDs in which those clients are connecting in with. If you hover over, as you can see here, we can see the breakdown of the data that's being used, specifically what is being prioritized based on the clients that we have there. And then we can also see over to the right when it comes to the wireless LAN that's being used as well. Now, if this was enabled on multiple wireless LANs, we would see that there would be a collection here, and we would be able to hover over each one of these and be able to identify the data that is being prioritized based on the configurations that we have set. Now, once we move down, we can see that we have a list of those calling clients. And we can see the data that is collected specifically is a host name of that particular client, the MAC address of that device, also the carrier identified from a profile perspective, which carrier that client is using, as well as the priority that is set within that profile and how that particular client is handled. You can see we have a traffic total as well as it broken down into from a uplink and a downlink perspective. Now you can select one of these clients and then you can see their specific client details below. That includes the MAC address of the AP in which they're connecting, the IP address of that client, as well as the carrier name that's identified and of course how it's prioritized. We have a start and end time as well as the traffic that's used for that particular session. If you click on other clients, you can see that you can get the details of that client as well. Each one of these clients that were listed here can be selected, and then those details can be provided to you for that particular client. Now the displays of these tables are based on the default of 8. However, you can change that value to a larger value, which would allow more records or more tables to be displayed within this particular environment. Each one of these are selectable and you can change that if you want to. We can further customize this list by selecting a time frame. The default is an hour, but you can see we can select 24 hours, 7 days, and that last 14 days as well. We can also narrow down this report when it comes to the zones that we have chosen, as well as specific wireless LANs if we have multiples configured on these APs, and be able to isolate this particular report and give us a more granular detail of the traffic that is being identified as Wi-Fi calling and what is being prioritized based on this service. So with this completes the demonstration of the carrier Wi-Fi calling feature, allowing us to prioritize that voice traffic of the clients that are using calling Wi-Fi services for their particular carrier and to ensure their traffic is getting the priority that we have set for it based on the wireless LAN forwarding of those packets. Thanks for watching this video. Hope you enjoyed it and can encourage you enough to look at some of the other videos within this series providing you more details of the new features that are being introduced within SmartZone 5.0. Thank you.